Good morning, everybody. When I was a kid, I spent 10 to 15 hours every week in church, not including Sunday services. I was in Bible study, the youth choir, youth group, and served on mission projects. It was a major part of my life. Once I graduated high school, church was pretty much left in my rear view. It was then I started struggling with my own faith, spirituality, and its place in my life. I met Caroline in college, and thankfully, several years later, she agreed to marry me. When Caroline and I got engaged in true Episcopal tradition, we were required to attend premarital counseling. The problem was these sessions were to be in person, and the church she grew up in was in Geneseo, New York, about 30 miles south of Rochester, and we lived in Atlanta. So there we were, young, fairly broke, and having to take multiple trips to Rochester to, in my mind, satisfy the rector who was going to marry us. Church, a parish family, even my faith was simply not a priority for me. It seemed unnecessary and difficult. These trips back to Geneseo to check some sort of box certainly wasn't moving me any closer to church. Many years passed, and while Caroline continued to attend church while we lived in Atlanta, even taking our kids with her, I stayed away. I was the proverbial Christmas, Easter, and Mother's Day Christian. When we moved to Birmingham, Caroline was determined to find a new church home. I was, as usual, supportive, but non-participating. As the kids got older, it became harder to talk around the hypocrisy of telling them church was important, even as I did not attend services. So feeling the guilt of that hypocrisy, I started to attending at least a couple of services at the latest church Caroline was visiting. Unfortunately, none of that really stuck. I would go from time to time, but as soon as I could find an excuse not to attend, I would seize that rationalization. Fast forward to a couple of years ago when Caroline, after having attended services at Ascension for a few months, encouraged me to go back. Historically, she wouldn't ask me very often to come with her to church, but when she did, I usually agreed. So I came to Ascension for a service, and then I came back, and then again, and each week, without really thinking much about it and without any cajoling from Caroline, I came back. Mostly I enjoyed the sermons and the congregation, and the music was fantastic. I didn't really engage much outside of the 60 minutes or so I would spend in the pew. I would enjoy the sermon, receive communion, smile and wave at the other people in church, and go home. This continued for the better part of 18 months. I helped cook pancakes for one Shrove Tuesday, and I attended a few supper clubs, but that was the extent of it. One Sunday, I read in the bulletin that I was in charge of coordinating a Lenten dinner. I didn't remember volunteering for that and hadn't actually talked to anybody about doing it. Turns out Caroline mentioned to Jack that I would likely be willing to help. Jack took care of committing me publicly, as I found out at the same time as the rest of the congregation that I would be responsible for feeding people. Thankfully, Jack's passive-aggressive attempt to involve me worked. The entire men's group was involved in the prep, cooking, and service of the meal. We planned the meal, we cooked, we laughed, broke bread, and served the church family. It felt good. I like to think it was a success and that people enjoyed the food and fellowship. But it was during that evening I recognized that service to a community was my way of connecting. Just like in my youth, that service drew me toward people. It was an opportunity to come to know the church and its community better and in a more intentional way. Now, I'm supposed to be talking to you about the men's group, its specific ministry, how that draws me into a better relationship with my faith, my community, and my parish family, and I know I've largely failed that task. But I share all of the preceding context because it was the men's group that changed my relationship with Ascension. During the first fireside chat, as we talked about what we wanted to get out of the group and participating in it, the conversation turned to service opportunities and the various ways we could act as a collection of resources and willing volunteers to be deployed in a variety of ways. It was the service orientation that I saw in that group that most likely drew me in. I saw a way to engage, participate, to serve in a way that worked for me, and by extension, participate in Ascension's ministry. It was an example of how various ministries can help meet people where they are. Everyone is in a different place on their life's journey. Creating more ways for people to approach their faith, to create a relationship with Christ and join our communal family through ministries like the men's group represents an important use of our time, resources, and energy. I believe it is one way we should measure our success in making Christ known through our love for all. Please find ways to participate and support the various ministries of Ascension. Every parishioner has something to offer, and through these ministries and groups, we grow in our faith, in our community, and in our love for one another.